Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Back to the Bronze Age. I am Count Chocula. This is my show where I reminisce about old comic books from the Bronze Age of Marvel Comics. Uh, I fondly reminisce and revisit. Today I'm going to be looking at the Fantastic Four 185, 186. Eventually, I'm going to cover issues 187 and 188 as well, but this is just going to be part one. Uh, that's a lot of, that's four issues to cover. So just going to split it up between two and two here. Um, Fantastic Four is what was my introduction to Marvel Comics back in 1975. Neighbor Kid had brought over an older neighbor kid had brought over an issue from 1968, which was, of course, during Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's uh, famous um, long run of the Fantastic Four that made them so popular in the 60s. Fantastic Four, of course, is the Marvel's flagship book that was from with their transition from Timely Atlas Comics. So, Fantastic Four wasn't a book that I would always be on my priority list to buy, but I had been reading Fantastic Four ever since I started reading Marvel comic books back in 1975. So, uh, the book I'm going to be looking at today, Fantastic Four 185, 186, were my first two Fantastic Four books I ever owned personally. Now they were given to me by a kid that was a couple years older than me that lived down the block from me on the same side of the street. He lived about five houses down, and he from time to time, he was just kind of a casual reader of comic books, and he would give me his leftovers, so to speak. And this was the I remember he gave me this. He gave me this issue shortly after it came out. So this was my very first issue that I ever owned. So we're gonna go right into. Should be bringing it up here. I need to refresh my YouTube page here. Here we go. Fantastic Four 185. Here There Be Witches. And this is George Perez, of course. And what you're going to be seeing, let's just get right into it here. Let me get the first page. Looking back at that cover, I always try to look at if I can see who find the signature on the cover. It's kind of a fun thing to do for me. There doesn't seem to be a signature on the cover, but I can tell, but just by the way the thing is drawn there, that's George Perez. So, and he is going to be the featured artist in the book here. Let me zoom. Let me get into the zoom in mode there. I'll switch it to full screen here. So, Lynn Wein, writer, editor, George Perez, and Joe Sinnott, the illustrators. Lynn Wein was a busy guy at Marvel at this time. He had just relinquished the writing duties on the X-Men. He was one of the main contributors of the relaunch of the X-Men with Giant Size X-Men #1 in 1975. Of course, he handed off the reins to Chris Claremont. The book still wasn't doing that well. It was on the verge of being canceled. But Lynn Wein, not only was he the editor at Marvel, he was writing at the point that Fantastic Four 185 came out. He was actually writing The Amazing Spider-Man, The Incredible Hulk, and The Fantastic Four, and he was the editor. So that was quite the workload. Lynn Wein, of course, best known, he created Wolverine, and like I said earlier, a big contributor to the relaunch of the X-Men in 1975. Of course, when Claremont took it over and Dave Cockrum was drawing the book, that's when the book started to take off in popularity. And the Fantastic Four's popularity since the 60s, definitely with Spider-Man, it was the Spider-Man Fantastic Four were the 1-2 punch of Marvel. They were the most popular books in the 60s, Marvel. But the Fantastic Four had started to decline in popularity quite a bit. It seemed to be a little more dated. It wasn't quite as the heroes weren't quite as seemed to be as kind of new and happening, if you will, as some of the newer books, like the Avengers and some of the X-Men were just on the come up a little bit. So yeah, the Fantastic Four were in decline a little bit sales wise, but it was still one of Marvel's. It was always in the maybe top 6 or 7 best-selling books of Marvel at the time. This is 1977, so of course George Perez we lost just a couple years ago. Joe Sinnott died just a couple years ago, but he was well into his 90s when he died. Joe Sinnott was he's a legendary figure in the world of comic books, from the Silver Age. During this launch of this book here, he's already well in his 50s, so he's already has an established career. And George Perez is just kind of one of the new kids on the block. He had just been with Marvel for just a couple years now, here in 1977. George Perez, sadly died last year. He had inoperable, I think, pancreatic cancer or something like that, and he decided not to go through all the treatments or everything. I did an episode kind of tribute to George Perez when he announced that his cancer was diagnosed as terminal, and he didn't have much longer to go. So it's really sad because George Perez, and in my view, he died way too young. I think he was in his early 60s, but one of my all-time favorite artists. Make a long story short, but so let's get right into it. Here There Be Witches. Now, what's going on with the Fantastic Four at this time is Reed Richards has lost his powers, and Sue comes in and says, "Any progress, darling?" "I think so, Sue, but I'll need another minute or two to make certain of my findings." Now, what's going on here is Franklin Richards, their son, has been abducted, kidnapped by someone that they trusted, which was Agatha Harkness. So we'll find out more about it. This is kind of the central plot point to this storyline. So it says, less than an hour ago, the man and his 3 companions returned from the still smoldering ruins of the place called Whisper Hill, their quest an abysmal failure. Since then, Reed Richards has been locked away here in his laboratory, oblivious to everything save the delicate task at hand, and he knows full well that the results of his efforts may well determine whether or not he will ever see his missing son again. And that happened a few issues before this. Now, Reed Richards has lost his powers. This had been going on for like 10 issues, maybe even more than that, prior to this book coming out. I think it was like Fantastic Four 177. So it had been 8 issues before this, where he had lost his powers. He's lost his ability to stretch. But of course, he's still, one of the smartest human beings on the planet. So I want to be sure I've gotten every last possible scrap of information from the remnants of the metallic egg which spawned the Eliminator. There, that about does it. Think heaven been noticed it lying in the tall grass just before we entered Whisper Hill. It's about the only thing besides us that survived the old house's destruction, as detailed last issue. Neo editor Lynn. I fed all the pertinent data I've gleaned from the egg into our computers. Now all we can do is await the results. So it shows a map here, and it looks like a little blip. It says, that's the spot, honey. The egg was made of metal ore mined there in a secluded area deep in the Colorado Rockies. If we ever hope to find our boy again, that's the next place we have to look. Then we better get started, Reed. No, Sue, I've one more thing to take care of first. You and the others get ready. I'll be back shortly. Of course, darling, whatever you say. Poor Reed. He just hasn't been himself since he lost his stretching powers. The way he lost his stretching powers had to do with there was a doppelganger Reed Richards from a counter Earth that came, and Reed Richards was like banished to the negative zone for a while, and the transition back had somehow taken his powers away. Another member of the Fantastic Four, the Ben Grimm, had just come back in a storyline the previous year. He just regained his power, and he was actually wearing like a rock suit that resembled his mutated thing body, but he had actually been cured, because one of the ongoing plot points of the Fantastic Four is Reed Richards feels terrible that he transformed one of his best friends. He was responsible for transforming one of his best friends into, the monstrous looking thing, So even though Ben Grimm had forgiven him and all that, he still had that guilt weighing on him. So he was always kind of looking for a way to reverse the effects of that cosmic ray accident they had that all gave them their powers. They're not mutants. They were given their powers through cosmic rays. So, but he says Sue says he feels utterly useless, as if he were a burden to the rest of us. But I have to make him realize he's wrong. Oh, Johnny, you startled me. Sorry, sis. Hey, are you all right? Now, Human Torch is one of the members that really likes being likes the fact that he gained powers from the cosmic rays. Now, the rest of the team kind of always struggle with it. Not really, little brother. I'm concerned about my husband and the fact he seems to be coming quietly apart at the seams. Yeah, I've noticed, Sue, and I wish we could do something to help him. Maybe we can. Ben, what are you doing back here, big buddy? Johnny's right, Ben. You only left for Alicia's a little while ago. So, ain't a Joe allowed to change his mind, Susie? Besides, Alicia was just as worried about little Franklin as I am, so we both figured I ought to come back and see how things was going. That's very sweet of you, Ben, as Ben is chomping on a cigar here. Sweet. My Aunt Petunia. Just let me get my mitts on the mugs what snatched my only godson doll, and I'll show you sweet revenge. I always liked how they always wrote Ben Grimm, from one of the New York suburbs. I'm afraid you'll have to wait your turn, or boroughs, I guess they call them, not suburbs. I'm afraid you'll have to wait your turn in line, old friend, behind me. What? And it shows Reed lighting his cigar with his stretching ability. Hey, it's Stretcho, and he's stretching again. I like how he calls him Stretcho. Only where you're wearing that old uniform. It was the only clean one I could find, big fella, but that isn't really important now. Of course not, darling. What is important that you have your powers back? I only wish that were true, Sue. But my so-called powers are really only an improved version of my auto extensors I designed when we all lost our powers several years ago, all the way back in Fantastic Four number 39. By wearing them over my own arms and under my costume, they allow me some of the elasticity I used to have. I'll say they do. I just want to be prepared as humanly possible when we go after whoever kidnapped my son. Then what are we standing around for? Let's go. So, Johnny, Sue, I want you to know I appreciate you putting on those matching uniforms. So they're all like going back to their older, they kind of had some updated, just slightly updated costumes. Why shouldn't they, pal? After all, we're a team, aren't we? Pogo playing Hangar 4. What matters to one of us matters to all. Yeah, that's us, Sprout, the four Mouseketeers. I guess despite occasional differences, that's what's kept us together over the years. Now you're getting the idea, brother-in-law. We're the Fantastic Four, Reed. Not 3, not 12, not 256. The cosmic accident that made us what we are, joined us in bonds that can never be broken. And it goes on to do the same old sentimental, we're family, Reed, and all this. Let's stop gabbing and get this show in the air. I've made some modifications in the Pogo plane recently, and she's never been readier to fly. Moments later, a heavy metal hatch slides back across the Baxter Building's roof, and a sleek silver missile erupts into the darkling sky, carrying four grim figures toward an unknown destination. Well, here goes nothing. I ain't sure how finding the spot the egg came from is going to help us, but we sure ain't got nothing better to do right now, old friend. All any of us can do is hope and pray. I really I like how clean George Perez's art looks there, and I love the way George Perez draws the thing. That's my favorite. He's my favorite artist that draws the thing. I just love the way he draws it. And Joe Sinnott's, just kind of basic, clean finishes and inks. Now, Joe Sinnott would leave inking the Fantastic Four shortly in the early 80s. Of course, John Byrne took over the Fantastic Four in the early 80s. And I think Joe Sinnott inked a couple of issues, but then John Byrne actually did the writing, the art, and the inking from here on. So that's a lot of work. And eventually I am going to be covering a lot of that John Byrne Fantastic Four run in the future. But even as the pogo plane vanishes into the distance, a crumpled piece of paper drifts lazily toward the Baxter Building against the stiffly blowing breeze. A piece of paper colored a distressingly familiar shade of green. Gently, it settles in through an open window without setting off a single one of Reed Richards' sensitive intruder alarms. But that's impossible, you say. Not for you-know-who. Hey, everyone, the Impossible Man is back, and I've just had the most marvelous experience. I've seen my first movie, and I've got to tell you all about it. He doesn't know that they're not there, I guess. It was called a revival of something called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And it features the most charming humans I've yet seen on this world. They wore these quaint costumes, and they were all busy killing one another over control of some mythical kingdom called Chicago. And hello, hey, is anybody here? The Impossible Man is kind of their resident alien that they encountered back in a way earlier issue of the Fantastic Four, and he became a Fantastic Four fan favorite or so. He's kind of a mischievous alien that can alter his molecular structure at will. He can basically become anything that he can see, and he likes to mimic everything. So it appears I'm alone, so what am I supposed to do until my friends return from... And by the way, he's super powerful as well. The perfect opportunity to continue my studies of this curious planet Earth. After all, there is still so much I have to learn about my adopted world, and perhaps this time I'll finally figure out which one is Starsky and which one is Hutch. Len Wein must have been a big fan of Starsky and Hutch, because he seems to reference Starsky and Hutch in a lot of comic books that he writes. Same time later, several thousand miles away, ain't exactly the best spot in the world for a bowling alley, is it? Just what exactly are we supposed to be looking for, Reed, as it looks like they're flying over the Colorado Rockies? I'm not certain, Johnny, but we're in a proper area. There should be a town of some sort indicated on the map. Maybe there should be, Reed, but there isn't. All I can see is an occasional mountain goat. What? Well, in that case, crew, we're coming up on a grade A first-class bona fide mirage. Take a look below. What are you talking about, Ben? I don't see a... Holy smoke, you're right, Ben. There is a town down there, but it's almost hidden by the surrounding peaks. Sheesh, no wonder it ain't listed on the map. This burg's so small you'd have to be born here to ever find it. Then you best land the pogo plane some distance outside of town. I don't want to attract any undue attention. We're going to walk in town in this brutal windstorm, Reed? Not if Benji will give me a hand with these boxes, sis. Why, hotshot? You got a horse and buggy stashed in one of those things? Close, big buddy. What I've got in these cartons is a car, at least the components of one. Now this I got to see. Looks like a modular car that Johnny Storm has created. Son of a gun, Squirt. You wasn't kidding. But couldn't you have made the blame thing a little more conservative? For me, Ben, this is conservative. Now hand me my normal duds and let's get going. Are you sure this is really necessary, Stretch? I mean, it ain't had to bundle up like this since the FF's early days, and Ben Grimm has put on a disguise. This is like a common disguise that he would wear, like walking around town. As I said, Ben, I don't want to. Don't want nothing to draw attention to us. If those who kidnapped little Franklin are in this town, I don't want them to be alerted. I don't want to alert them to our presence. You understand, don't you, Ben? There's just so much at stake here. Sure, Susie, sure. But you better talk a little louder, doll. I can hardly hear you over this howling wind. So this is New Salem, huh? Sure ain't much to look at, is it? Appears there's only one road leading in and out of here, and I'll bet they roll it up at sundown. Yeah, I can hear myself again. What happened to the wind? It stopped, Ben, right after we entered the city limits. But why? Don't sound so confused, Johnny. It's nothing supernatural. Apparently, this geographical location is such that it cuts the wind off cold. I'd assume that's why the site was chosen for the town in the first place. So it looks like they're driving through this little town. Kind of reminds me of an old Star Trek episode there. It's certainly, let me click on this here. Yeah, it's certainly a quiet little village, maybe too quiet. If you notice, Reed, there's not a single other car on the street except ours. You're reading too much into this, Johnny. In a town this size, there really isn't much need of one. Well, at least we ain't going to have no hassles finding parking. Frankly, Johnny, I agree with Reed. New Salem is really quite lovely. Yeah, you sort of expect some smiling country sheriff to pop up any second, don't you? Big buddy, you're not even close. Here comes somebody. Big buddy, you're not even close. Here comes somebody, all right, but he's not exactly Andy Griffith. You can say that again. My name is Nicholas Scratch, and as mayor, I bid you the most welcome to fair New Salem. If there is anything I can do during your brief stay here, please don't hesitate to ask. It's very kind. My associates and I are here to do some research into possible mining in your area. Well, I'm afraid mining is out of my field, Mr. Smith, I see. Well, Mr. Smith, if you'll accompany me to City Hall, I'm certain we can supply you with everything you might need. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It'll be our pleasure. Will you need all of us for this, Reed? Not really, son. Why don't you and Ben take a look around town? We'll meet you back here soon. Come on, Squirt. Let's take a stroll. I'm starting to swelter in this get-up. Sure, Ben, why not? After all, there's no telling what we might find. And it looks like in a building, like a second story of a building, somebody's looking at them here. They have come as I knew they would. They seek their missing child and the woman who abducted him, the heart-sick Agatha Harkness. Of course, she's referring to herself. That is Agatha Harkness. She's kind of the caretaker for Franklin Richards, who also has powers, is unbelievably powerful. Somehow I must, the brat is crying again, old woman. Either you keep him quiet or I will. If these were olden times, upstart, you would not dare speak to me thus. Maybe not, but we'll never know now, will we? That young man remains to be seen. Now hush, little one, you have no need to weep. Nothing will harm you as long as Agatha Harkness yet lives. I want my mommy and daddy, Auntie Agatha. I know, my little love, I know, but I fear you must learn patience. Any luck, Stretch? None, I'm afraid. According to the town records, the Eliminator's eggs simply could not have come from here. We'll just have to go home and start all over. No, they're giving up, returning to their car. If the Fantastic Four leave New Salem, all hope for young Franklin and myself will be lost. I am old. I have seen my fair share of years. Whatever happens to me now does not matter, but nothing must happen to the child. Once they pass the city limits, it will be too late to stop them. Thus, I must act now. She seems to be summoning some sort of power. Agatha Harkness is a very powerful witch. For those who are not familiar with the character. Holy cow, the road out of town is blocked by a wall of flames. What in blazes did you do that for, hot shot? Ben Grimm thinks Johnny Storm had something to do with that. I had nothing to do with this, Ben. What? If you're not responsible, Johnny, somebody back in town must be. It appears our ruse has failed, brothers and sisters. Then the time for deception has passed, as the town folks are gathering there. Let the unpleasant illusion we have cast over our town and themselves and ourselves now be gone, and let us stand revealed as what we truly are. And the whole town changes it into some like medieval looking castle structures with gargoyles and everything in the background. But now that you share our secret, intruders, you can never be permitted to leave. Yet what shall we do with them? The Most High approaches. He will decide their fate. Like a living sea, the dark-clad throng parts, so that the mysterious Most High may pass unhindered. And thus he does not remain mysterious for very long. And Sue says, whatever you're planning, mister, you'll never get away with this. I beg to differ, Reed Richards. I will get away with whatever I please, so long as I hold your child and his governess, my captives. And he opens like a little portal that views Agatha Harkness kind of being held prisoner here with Franklin. I love this panel here. This classic George Perez. Then you ain't gonna hold him captive for long, Bright Eyes. As for now, of course, the thing's iconic trademark. It's clobbering time. Flame on. That's, of course, Johnny Storms. Mister, I don't know what you thought to gain by kidnapping our son, but it was the biggest mistake of your life. And she uses her force, like a force bubble, to shred her disguise. Fools, you have reckoned without my power. The power of the Satan staff. By the spell of flame and bell, by the place where demons sing, hear my cry, turn black the sky. Let the beast of stone take wing, the beast of stone, as all the gargoyles come alive. Fly, my children, fly, destroy the Fantastic Four. So you knew all along who we were, Scratch. Then you should also know that we won't be taken easily. The FF have powers of their own, mister, and we know how to use them. Now you're sounding like the big brain we used to know, Reed. We'll show these bat-winged bozos that it just ain't right to hassle the America's favorite foursome. There's rock in your eye, Buster. Despite their ponderous weight, these gargoyles fly almost as fast as I can, and one of them is close on my tail. But there are places the Human Torch can go that these granite goons can't possibly follow. In an instant, the blazing youth is enveloped in a much bigger blaze, leaving his rough-hewn pursuer momentarily confused, uncertain what to do next, and thus all it does now is perish. Peekaboo, Buster. Yeah, he went inside of a cliff and like melted himself inside of a cliff and then came out. He intensified his flame. Nearby, the staff member of the Fantastic Four has problems of her own. These creatures are tireless. This one keeps pounding on my invisible force shield until he bursts through, and I don't even want to think what will happen then. Which means it's time to demonstrate that my powers can be used for offense as well as defense. These auto extensors seem to be working far better than I expected, Sue. I never doubted it, darling. You're still Reed. Look out above us. I appreciate the timely warning, sweetheart, but I've already seen it. That's why I was planning to do this. Silently, the people of New Salem stand witness to the bizarre battle, their faces expressionless masks, save for the subtle smoldering about the eyes. I'm just about finished with my bunch of playmates, gang. Any of you guys need a little help? No thanks, Benji. A minute more and we'll have all these uglies wrapped up. Then we can devote ourselves to the real menace, the town folk of New Salem. Then almost as if he has somehow heard the Torch's comments, Ebony demons of the night, leave thy foes at last alone. Cease thy never-ending flight and return once more to stone. Be careful, all this is probably some sort of trick. Well, I sure wouldn't bet against it, Stretch. These Jaspers give me a king-size case of the creeps. These Jaspers. The moment has arrived, my children. Let the final phase begin. And at their leader's command, the people of New Salem clasp hands to eager hand, add voice to chanting voice, and the slight smoldering in their eyes becomes a blazing fire. Louder the chanting grows, ever louder, invoking powers and forces far beyond the natural scope of mortal kin. Till at last the sing-song supplications begin to produce the intended effect. Huh? What's wrong with me? Feels like something's taking a hold of my mitts. I can't control them anymore. Something's forcing me to punch myself. Reed, you got to help me, for I mash myself into... No, the ground is reaching up for me, and I can't project my force field. Don't worry, darling, I'm coming for... Sorry about this, buddy, but I just can't help myself as the thing punches Reed Richards. And it's starting to affect me, too. I can't control my flight. In pity's name, what's happening to us? But it appears pity does not enter into the picture as the mud-bound Sue Richards hurtles savagely skyward to extinguish her wildly whirling brother's flame in a burst of fearsome fury. Then, like latter-day scions of Icarus, they plunge helplessly to earth once more, to be impaled in the ground like two oversized spikes, unharmed but helpless. As George Perez is putting panels in between the actions of Nicholas Scratch holding his Satan staff. Looks like I'm the only one left standing, don't it? But one of us is all that's really needed. These bozos are powerful, all right. I'll give them that much. There still ain't nothing going to stop me from taking this town apart, starting with you. Your stamina is truly amazing, Benjamin Grimm. Anyone else would have fallen long ago. But not all the stamina in the world can save you from this fool, the fury of the arcane arts. You and your companions were all fools, Thing, for thinking you could ever hope to defy our power. After all, what chance could any mortal being stand against a city ruled by witches? Next issue, the killer's called Salem 7. You'll have to see them to believe them. So that was my very first Fantastic Four comic that I owned. Now, this is coming right on the... This time in the Fantastic Four, they're just about ready to launch a Saturday morning cartoon of the Fantastic Four. This is mid 1977. I think the Fantastic Four Saturday morning cartoon, which I was super excited about because they started advertising it in Marvel Comics. Let me switch to the next issue here, the cover of the next issue. And I'm going to talk a little more about that Fantastic Four cartoon. A lot of people don't know about it. Of course, I'm like 8, 9 years old when it came out, and I couldn't wait. I was like, "Oh, the Fantastic Four cartoon." Of course, this is right around the same time. They had the Super Friends. They had like just. I think for like 2 years they had the Super Friends cartoon. It just wasn't that good. I mean, I liked it because, back then as kids, we were desperate to see superhero cartoons and TV shows. They had the Adam West Batman and the Linda Carter Wonder Woman, but and they were just launching the Hulk. They had a couple Captain America TV movies, and they had a Doctor Strange TV movie. And, of course, you had the live-action Spider-Man that lasted, maybe like 10, 11 episodes or whatever. But they were just starting to launch the Incredible Hulk show. But I was really excited about a Fantastic Four cartoon. Unfortunately, I mean, I liked the cartoon as a kid. I thought it was cool, but they didn't have the Human Torch in it, and I just hated that because they substituted Herbie the robot for the Human Torch, for the fourth member of the Fantastic Four, because they were worried about lawsuits of kids lighting themselves on fire and stuff. I mean, I can kind of understand where they're coming from, but I really think that's kind of ridiculous. You know, okay, a kid might light themselves on fire, sure, I understand that, but I mean, it's like Beavis and kids watching Beavis and Butthead and lighting themselves on fire. I mean, there's got to be a point. It gets a little bit ridiculous. I think of course they've had animated Fantastic Four since then that had Human Torch in it. I don't know if any kid lit themselves on fire because of that, but there was a lot of self-censoring stuff going on in the late 70s and all throughout the 80s on television. And unfortunately, it took away, it distracted from how much I enjoyed the cartoon. I still liked it because they made up for that a little bit by having a lot of characters from the Fantastic Four comic book, like the Inhumans. They had an episode where they had the Inhumans. They had Impossible Man, which you'll see more of in the next few issues. They had an episode that had the Impossible Man. They had like some of the villains. They had Blastar. I'm pretty sure they had a Doctor Doom episode. What would the Fantastic Four be without a Doctor Doom episode? But previously before that, by the way, they also had a Thing cartoon, which had really nothing to do with the Fantastic Four thing. It was about a kid that had a ring that would transform himself into the Thing. It wasn't Ben Grimm or anything. That cartoon was silly. I watched it maybe once or twice, and I was like, this is a embarrassment to the character. I guess the character was so popular that they did a little spin-off thing and just had some kid with a ring, and he would say, "Thing ring, do your thing," and he would turn into the Thing. I think it was only on for 1 year on Saturday morning, but it was bad. It was really bad. And they had a Fantastic Four. Marvel had a bunch of like weird, like still frame animation comic book animated stuff, like in the late '60s, and they had Fantastic Four, and they had Captain America and the Hulk, and they had an Avengers, couple of Avengers episodes and stuff like that, along with the Spider-Man. I don't mean to go on a rant about old Marvel animated, but the point was I was desperate to see Marvel stuff on TV, and that late '70s Fantastic Four animated, it wasn't the best quality animation, and not having the Human Torch really hurt, but there were some cool episodes, that I look back on that had some, like the Inhumans and stuff like that. That was pretty cool. But yeah, the fact they didn't have the Fantastic Four in it was very, very disappointing. And then later, I think the following year, they implemented Herbie the robot into the Fantastic Four continuity into the comic book for a short amount of time, but I don't think it ever went over with the fans. So anyway, here's issue 186, and I had this as well. This issue was actually given to me by my friend on that lived on my block growing up as well. So he gave me issues 185, 186. Now issue 187 was the first. The issue after this was the very first one that I bought myself from the grocery store spinner rack, and it's probably one of my favorite issues of Fantastic Four ever. But so here we go with the part 2 of the Enter Salem 7. So let's get right into it here. Another great George Perez cover. make sure I got that. There we go. Len Wein, of course, writer, editor. You know, one good thing, one thing that the Fantastic Four, even though their popularity was starting to decrease, um, one thing they had going for them was consistency of creative teams. You know, you had Jack Kirby for the longest time, that legendary run. One of the greatest runs in comic book history was Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Joe Sinnott um, as the embellisher inker. And after Jack Kirby left, they had, I believe they had Rick Wilson. Then they had, um, I can't remember his name. The guy that took Rich Buckler. Rich Buckler is who I'm thinking of, and that was actually George Perez was the assistant to Rich Buckler. Rich Buckler did some of the earlier '70s, mid '70s issues of Fantastic Four, and art very similar to John Buscema and Jack Kirby, kind of a mix between. Rich Buckler is really, and those are some really good issues. But Len Wein had been writing the book here for, I think he had been on the book a couple years now. So, like I said, he was a workhorse at Marvel in the mid to late '70s. Eventually, like George Perez, he ended up leaving Marvel to go to DC. But so we still have Len Wein, writer, editor, and still George Perez as the artist, and old legendary Joe Sinnott as the inker. So let's get right into it. Enter the Salem Seven. Unconscious is not the best of all possible ways to spend an evening. As you can see them, they're like chained in some kind of dungeon-looking cell here. If you don't believe us, just ask the FF, who spent the last several hours in the condition after a most unfortunate encounter with the bizarre populace of New Salem, Colorado. Even as we speak, our stalwart heroes are awakening, and needless to say, they're not happy. Are Mommy and Daddy okay, Auntie Agatha? As well as can be expected, little one. Hey, speak for yourself, sister. Personally, I feel like warmed over chopped liver. Whatever we've gone through, Ben, it's been worth it. We found little Franklin. Here, darling, come to Mommy. Auntie Agatha took good care of me, Mommy. I did what I could, Mrs. Richards. Please try to forgive me for involving you in this. Exactly what is this, Miss Harkness? Why did you steal our son? I thought perhaps his special powers could protect me from those who sought to return me here against my will. But I have been apart from you all for so long. I did not realize the child no longer had such powers. When those I hid from I last found me, there was nothing I could do to prevent our abduction. I see. Then that helps to explain the inhuman eliminator your captors left behind to destroy Whisper Hill and any evidence of you ever having lived there. Yeah, including us. Yeah, the eliminator was a robot sent out to destroy Agatha Harkness and all traces of Agatha Harkness and anyone that befriended Agatha Harkness. It was in the previous few issues of Fantastic Four before the last one I just went over. We traced I guess they're going to recap some of it here. We traced the Eliminator's point of origin back here to New Salem, where we soon found ourselves battling an army of monstrous stone gargoyles. You have to always have the short little recap of last issue. And they say gargoyles animated through some supernatural means by a man named Nicholas Scratch, aided and abetted by the unholy Satan staff and the citizens of the city. All pretty fair recounting of the pulse-pounding events of last several issues. Lynn. And while their screwy statues couldn't stop us, they turned our own powers against us. I knocked myself silly with my own dainty mitts, and I, for one, want to know the reason why. Yes, Agatha, who are these people? How did they gain their powers? It is a long and tragic story, Mrs. Richards. One which we will not have time to recount now, woman. Who? It is Nicholas Scratch, my friends, and I am pleased to see you are all awake. It is only proper to have an audience present when we read the verdict. Bailiff, you may proceed. Be it known that the woman called Agatha Harkness, having been found guilty by a jury of her peers, hereby stands convicted of treason. Thus, in accordance with the laws of New Salem, she is to be taken to a place of public execution where she shall be swiftly put to death. Said sentence to be carried out immediately. That's what you think, Buster. If you so as much touch that lady, we'll bring this whole town down around your ears and then stuff it piece by piece down your ugly throat. Despite the fact we have demonstrated your powers are useless against us, I believe you might well attempt to make good your threat, in which case you force me to take protective measures of a much more extreme nature. Franklin, sweet Lord Reed, what's happening to him? Mommy, Daddy, please help me, as Franklin Richards is disappearing from Sue's arms. No, not again. I won't let it happen again. Give me back my baby, you monster. Give him back before easy, Sue. Hysteria won't accomplish anything now. But my baby, do not distress yourself, my dear. Your child is quite safe. This is merely their way of assuring that you will not interfere while they do what must be done. No, Agatha, you can't let them. But I must, my child, for your child's sake. I pray someday you will forgive me for the grief I have caused you. Farewell, my friends. I will always love you all. What are you doing? What are you going to do with her, Scratch? You know the answer to that full well, Ben Grimm. And when the ceremony is finally over and the old woman is slain, I intend to return here and pronounce sentence upon you. What are we supposed to do now, Reed? So long as they hold little Franklin, sweetheart, there's not much we can do. But if we stand here and do nothing, Agatha Harkness will die. What a revolting development this is. I love this panel here. I mean, George Perez just draws the thing beautifully. Looks like they're switching scenes here. One thing about Len Wein, I mean, his writing is the way he writes comic books. You're going to get it's a fast pace. You're always going to get he jumps from storyline to storyline. He doesn't ever have like a very long plot thread. You know, it's a quick story wrap. You know, it's a couple issues, maybe 2 or 3, 4 issues at the most, and then he wraps up and he's straight into the next thing. Several thousand miles away from sinister New Salem, in the heart of darkest Manhattan, stands the far-famed Baxter Building, home of the captive Fantastic Four. Though usually the scene of considerable hustle and bustle, its uppermost floors are all but deserted right now, save for the pointy-headed emerald house guest called the Impossible Man. And it shows in the previous panel there's like some sort of energy headed toward the Baxter Building. This Impossible Man sitting here watching TV. Our expenses? Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And someone else, and there's someone in the background behind Impossible Man while he's watching TV. Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. What he's watching looks like he's watching that's the final scene in the movie Casablanca, I believe. It's been a while since I've seen that, but Len Wein likes to pepper in like some cultural references every once in a while. I just can't get enough of that colorful human with the lisp. I wonder how famous he might have become if he could only have spoken clearly. He's talking about Humphrey Bogart, of course. That's a question you're not going to live long enough to answer, fool. Who? And there's a bunch of energy that envelops Impossible Man. Whoever this one is, he will cause us no trouble now. Come, there is much to be done and little time to waste. And on that mysterious note, we return you to New Salem. Keep moving, old woman. You have no friends here to help you now, and justice awaits you at the top of those stairs. Why are you doing this, Nicholas? It's what you deserve, old woman, for deserting your people, for deserting me. I sought only to live among normal men once more, Nicholas, and now you must pay the price of your desire, woman. This is a cool. This is a cool big panel here by George Perez with the demon mouth open coming out of the mountain. And the town folk are all down there in robes like a flame and everything. They're having some sort of ritual. You have been duly tried by the very people you once dwelt among, and they have found you guilty of betraying the great secret they have struggled so hard these many years to maintain, the secret of our very existence. Now, you left New Salem years ago. You knew the penalty for anyone convicted of fraternizing with humanity was death, yet still you defied our wishes. And now the time has come for you to answer for your crime. The law you speak of is an archaic law, Nicholas, one which has not been employed for many years before I left here. The so-called trial you say I have received is a blatant mockery of justice. Perhaps, old woman. But when the sentence passed upon you by this kangaroo court has at last been carried out, mockery or not, you will be just as dead. Meanwhile, will you quit stomping around like that, Ben? You're shaking the entire cell. Sorry, hotshot, but I got to do something. All this waiting is driving me up the wall. What we all actually need right now is to find some way out of here. But the guard outside our door is certain to sound the alarm at our first sign of us attempting to escape. Not even the auto extensors I'm wearing over my arms to duplicate my stretching powers can help. He'd be bound to see them. Then we'll just have to come up with something he can't see, Reed. And we know who's the resident expert in that department, don't we, sis? This is no time for joking, Johnny. What I'm about to attempt now requires total concentration. I've got to use my invisible force shield as I've rarely used it before. Slip it out between the bars of our cells without alerting the guard. And then before he has time to suspect anything, I've got to strike. Beautifully done, Sue. He slammed his head back against this heavy iron door before he could make a sound. Now, if I can just manipulate these blasted mechanical arms of mine well enough to unlock the cell, that does it. Now let's get moving and quickly. There may still be time to save Agatha Harkness. Only pray you're right, darling. I'll fly on ahead, make sure the way is clear. Yeah, that's the one thing I still can't figure. If they was so blamed worried about us escaping, how come they only left one guard? Benji, old buddy, anybody ever tell you you've got a terminally big mouth? There's a second line of defense waiting for us up the top of the stairs. But I don't think we'll have any problem getting past them. Heck, they're not even armed. One does not require weapons of the flesh to deal with such as you, Johnny Storm, when one possesses the weapons of the soul. Holy smoke. What happened to them, Reed? I don't know, Sue. Somehow they've changed. That ain't the half of it, Stretch. They ain't even human anymore. I love this panel. No, Benjamin Grimm. Instead, we have become a supernatural squadron created solely to defy your own inhuman powers. You may call us Salem 7. Can I name the Salem 7? Yes, I can. That is Bruticus, Hydron, Vacuum, Gazelle down here, Vertigo, Thorn, and Reptilia. Yeah. And this is the first appearance of these characters. Now, these characters haven't been used that much in the comic books. They did appear. They were used a few years later in a Fantastic Four annual, I believe. I don't know might be annual number 14 or something like that. I can't remember. Can't remember the exact issue that these characters would appear again. Now, whether or not these characters have been used recently, I couldn't tell you that. But during this era of comic books, they were used. They were used, I think, once more. Bruticus is like a big lion-looking dude. they're kind of a little reminiscent of maybe maybe like the some Teen Titans enemies in DC that George Perez and Marv Wolfman created. I think they're called the Fatal Five or something like that. I can't remember. Um, it's DC. I don't care. Rarely I talk about DC Comics, or something along the lines of the Inhumans or something like that. But I like Reptilia's visual. That's really cool. Lady, I wouldn't even call you late for dinner. Ben, wait, too late. As powerful as you may be, Ben Grimm, you are still no match for Bruticus. Look, I don't know what sideshow you all escaped from. You're not exactly dealing with amateurs here. Know what I mean? Foolish youth. We seven are possessed of powers more than equal to yours. Witness how ineffectual your flames are against the aquatic abilities of Hydron. I like how they I like the lettering when they're announcing their names. This guy's a living fire hose. He's going to Johnny, are you all right? Fine, sis. I guess I'm still a little wet behind the ears. Don't worry, you guys. But don't you guys worry about me. Just defend yourselves. But there is no defense, Johnny Storm, against the explosive power spines of Thorn. Unless, of course, you happen to command your own invisible force shield, mister. Cease your angry attack, Ben Grimm. Your limitless strength is useless against Vacuum. Vacuum, it kind of looks robotic in a way. Kind of looks like a version of a little like the Super Adaptoid. You think so, huh? Well, you just stand right where you are, okay? And let's find out. To your everlasting regret, my friend, I intend to do precisely that. Hey, I went clean through you. Your elongated arms are most impressive, Reed Richards, but your reach far exceeds your grasp when you face the animal-like agility of a gazelle. She kicks Reed Richards. Stop your hopeless struggling, Johnny Storm. Nothing that lives can escape the clutching coils of Reptilia. That's what you think, Snake Lady. Our fight is giving me a chance to dry off, and I doubt you'll still want to hold me when I flame on. And if you want to kick up your heels, sister, you can start doing it somewhere else. That man you were pounding on is my husband, and I won't let you. Sue, sweet Lord, no. She was protecting me with her force shield when one of Thorn's power spines exploded. She took the full brunt of the blast. Have no fear, Reed Richards. Your wife is only stunned. We were ordered to do nothing more than prevent your escape. Thanks for letting us know that, Shaggy. Too bad Noah gave us the same orders about you. Shaggy. Way to go, Hotshot, but leave some of them for me. The ever-loving blue-eyed thing is just itching for some action. Perhaps, Ben Grimm, but you shall not find it. Oh, it's just you, huh? And just what are you going to do to stop me? You ain't lifted a pinky during this whole blame fracas. Indeed, my friend, but you shall learn that mine is the awesome power of all. For mine is the power of vertigo. Holy Joe, what's she done to me? Head spin and Phyllis got caught on a merry-go-round. Got to do something to stop myself before I toss my cookies. That glow from her eyes, somehow it's destroyed Ben's equilibrium. I've got to do something before it's too late. Starting to lose my voice. Way ahead of you, boss man. A little hot foot should keep your space lady busy long enough for Ben to clear his head. You strike well, Johnny Storm, but in vain. For the ability to become immaterial is but one of my many powers. Holy smoke, the guy is literally a vacuum. He's sucking all the air in the vicinity directly into his body, and the sudden lack of oxygen is snuffing out my flames. We must end this battle quickly, all. Every moment we waste brings Agatha Harkness that much closer to her doom. And you to yours, fool. if you do not surrender before, and he grabs Reed Richards' arms, which actually aren't his arms. His arms, they're artificial, but even as the bestial Bruticus shouts in stunned surprise, the world erupts in dazzling brilliance for an instant, and then the blinding lights fade. The spell that transformed us could work solely against the natural powers of the Fantastic Four, but utilizing artificial means against us, you have returned us to what we were. Well, in that case, Cuddles, guess what time it is, Cuddles? We break away here. And in the name of common decency, we'd best turn our attention elsewhere. My friends, in centuries agone, we who were witches led lives of great persecution. In old Salem, our fellows were slain for their beliefs, and thus we who remained left humanity behind and founded our own communities. So they moved out from Salem, Massachusetts to New Salem, Colorado. We call this city New Salem so they would never forget our years of suffering and swore never to involve ourselves with mortal men again. But Agatha Harkness has defied our laws for reasons yet unexplained. She, who was once our leader, departed New Salem and committed the unpardonable sin of revealing our existence to those of the outside world. Now she must pay for her crime. At my command, you seven shall raise your power staves, and there's a huge explosion in the middle of the ritual platform here. By the seven-sided circle, what manner of madness is this? Like we said before, Scratch, you touch that lady and they'll have to scrape you up with a spoon. It's time to put an end to this insanity, Scratch, before we put an end to you. Please, Mr. Richards, for the sake of your child, do not interfere. Forgive me, Agatha, but I must. People of New Salem, before you make the most grievous error, I ask you hear us out. I hope you know what you're doing, Stretch. In all the years I have known this woman, never once has she betrayed your trust. It's true. We never even would have found your city if we hadn't been forced to come here to find young Franklin Richards. Yes, it was the abduction of my child that brought us here, an abduction engineered for reasons I still don't understand by your own Nicholas Scratch. So if it's some sort of traitor you're looking for, I suggest you look there. No, he's lying, but my Satan staff will soon still his tongue. Not if I can help it, and I can. Who? I should have realized the invisible girl. You better believe it, mister. You've kidnapped my baby, and you can pray, and you can bet you're going to pay for it. They still call her, this is a time where they still called her the invisible girl. John Byrne changed that. He started referring to her as the invisible woman when he took over the book in the early 80s. Foolish woman, these are my people. They will never listen to your no, Most High. Let her continue. I, for one, would like to hear what she has to say. What? Impudent fool. You dare deny my wishes, when but with the slightest gesture I can destroy you? Whenever George Perez drew the Fantastic Four, there's a lot of Jack Kirby. You could tell he tries a little harder to emulate Jack Kirby. These two panels are very Jack Kirby-esque. You'll notice if George, I mean, of course he's going to have, like when he did the Avengers in the 70s, he had different inkers like Pablo Marcus and whoever, but his art style looks a little different when he draws the Avengers, you can tell. Now, of course, he's got Joe Sinnott embellishing him, inking him. So naturally, Joe Sinnott inked Jack Kirby for, the better part of a decade. A very long run on the Fantastic Four. So naturally, the art is going to look a little more like Jack Kirby's. It's a good mix. But these two panels, especially this panel right here where it says "I can destroy you," that looks tremendously like a Jack Kirby classic Jack Kirby panel. Nicholas Scratch's impulsive action stuns the gathered throng into silence. For a moment, they study those gathered on the great stone altar before them. And then, as they have so many times before, the people of New Salem clasp hand to eager hand, raise voice to chanting voice, and the smoldering in their eyes become a raging fire. So they're doing their little ritual again. No, what have I done? My rash act made them realize the truth, that I was the one who betrayed them, not you. Any idea what's going on here, Squirt? I'm not sure, Ben, but it looks like the same sort of spell they used to turn our powers against us. Last issue, right? Lynn Wein. No, they chant the spell of eternal banishment. Only you can help me now. I, Nicholas? How? You've got to stop them, old woman. You've got to make them understand before it's too late. No, Nicholas, I'm sorry, but there's nothing more I can do for you now except mourn. Now, why would Agatha Harkness mourn for Nicholas Scratch? And shortly after the apologies have been made and the goodbyes have been said, man, am I ever glad to see the last of that junk. I'm inclined to agree with you, big buddy. But still, I can't help wondering what the people of New Salem could have contributed to the world. Just think what they could learn if they were willing to, hey, something's wrong down there. The whole city is starting to glow. Indeed, Johnny Storm, a glow that it swiftly envelops the entire area and everything within it. For if you were to listen carefully over the Pogo Plains whine, perhaps you might hear the doleful sound of chanting. And thus know that those of New Salem have considered how much they might contribute to the world of mortal men, and consider, too, what mortal men might offer them in turn. And they have at last decided that there really is no place for them in such a world as this. They are gone to a better place. I hope a place where the memories can finally be healed. I wish them well. Even after all they've done to you, Aggie, I figured you'd at least hate that Nicholas Scratch joker. No, Ben Grimm, I bear no malice for him, only pity. After all, how could a woman hate her own son? So Nicholas Scratch was her son. Next issue, it's time. Next issue, it's back to the Baxter Building for a battle with two of the most unexpected super foes of all. Be here for Trouble Times 2. Now, the next issue, which is Fantastic Four 187, is the first time I ever bought a Fantastic Four, like I said earlier, off of the comic book, or off of the grocery store comic book spinner rack. And these two issues that I just read were given to me. They were in terrible shape. Like, I think one of them had a big chunk of the cover missing and stuff like that. But hey, a free comic back when I'm 8 years old, a free comic book is a free comic book. But I had been reading Fantastic Four at the grocery store and been given a few issues. And I had read some of the Jack Kirby, couple issues of the Jack Kirby Stan Lee stuff. So, I knew the basis of it, but and they had some reprint issues as well that I would be able to look at on the grocery store spinner rack. But these four issues were always kind of special to me. I always loved them because they were, Fantastic Four was my introduction to Marvel Comics, and then on top of putting George Perez's art and at the into the books, it just made them all that more special. And he was also doing fill-ins on the Avengers at this time, so really cool stuff. But the next two issues were like two of my favorites throughout the 70s that I'm going to be covering, and that'll be on part 2 the next episode. So which I'm not sure when I'll be able to get to, but probably later on in the week or next weekend I will cover Fantastic Four 187 and 188. So hope you enjoyed those, and I certainly, it's been a long time since I had reread this. I was surprised I still knew the characters, but I just of the Salem 7. But I love those characters as a kid when I first read this, so I made sure that I kind of memorized them, even though they were never really used in any kind of significant way in the Marvel comics. Since then, I guess I don't know, for whatever reason it just didn't go over. But you think now they kind of cursed themselves out of existence, or chanted themselves out of existence, according to the end of this comic book. But they do end up appearing one more time. And I don't really recall. I'm not even sure if they, I know I've read the issue. I know it's a Fantastic Four annual or whatever, but I just thought those 7 characters had some cool visuals. Yeah, it's a little over the top, it's definitely 70s, it's definitely 70s comic book, comic book stuff, a little over the top, a little campy, very comic book like. And I wish comic books would kind of go back to that format a little bit. The comic books nowadays, in my opinion, have become just too full of themselves. That's kind of a simple way to put it, but in my opinion, the comic books now they've just become way too full of themselves, and everything has to be on serious or just kind of self-grandizing or whatever. So a lot of that's the fault of the people that are hired now to produce produce stories about these characters. They just don't know. They don't know how to write comic books. So anyway, that's enough about my little social commentary on the current state of comic books. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope anyone that ends up watching this video, hope you enjoyed it. I try to at times upload the audio version to Spotify. I'm not sure if I'll continue doing that. I'll probably just leave them posted on YouTube. It's kind of strange to have an audio. This is actually better in the video format, because I do go over the comic books. I do try to read them. I enjoy revisiting these comic books. So anyway, until next time, I'm going to be covering part 2 of this. Len Wein, George Perez, 1977 Fantastic Four, issue 187, 188. So take care.